I still remember the first time I saw the sign Skyline Ridge Trail, experience hikers only. It was the kind of warning that sounded more like an invitation to our group. There were 4 of us, me, Rick, Claire and Jonah. We'd hiked together for years, from the Smokies to the Cascades, and we prided ourselves on taking the hard trails, the ones that made your calves burn and your coffee taste like victory in the morning. The Skyline Ridge was supposed to be tough, but well marked, a 20-mile stretch of switchbacks, waterfalls and alpine views that most hikers split across 2 days. We planned to do it in 1. The morning was clear and cool when we set out, the kind of day where the sunlight slants through the trees like gold dust. The rhythm of boots on dirt, the clack of trekking poles, it all felt right. We were in our element. Around noon, we reached the narrow bridge that crossed Blackwater Creek, swollen from last week's rain. The current below was foaming white, and as Rick stepped onto the first plank, there was a deep creak. Then, without warning, the far side of the bridge slumped and gave way. He barely made it back before the whole thing collapsed, timbers spinning downstream like driftwood. We stood staring at the broken span for a long time. The map showed the only other crossing was 5 miles back, and none of us liked the idea of losing that time. Claire noticed an old service path branching off near the creek. It was overgrown and littered with fallen branches, but it seemed to angle toward the same ridge. "Could reconnect past the next bend," she said. "It's worth checking." Against my better judgment, we agreed. The path twisted deeper into the forest, the canopy closing above us like green glass. Soon, it narrowed until we were brushing through ferns and bramble. The GPS lost signal. Every so often, we'd find what looked like old blazes on the trees, faded white paint half swallowed by bark, but they didn't match any of the routes on our maps. When the first thunder rolled in the distance, we realised how alone we really were. By late afternoon, the conversation had turned short and practical. We were rationing our water, and that's when Jonah's filter snapped at the hinge. The last clean spring we'd passed was hours behind us. The creeks here ran cloudy with silt, and though we boiled some, none of us trusted it. The air hung thick, every breath damp and heavy. When we stopped to rest, I caught Claire glancing at me. Just a flicker of worry, but enough to make my stomach tighten. We weren't in control anymore. When the storm finally broke, it came hard. We huddled under a tarp, strung between 2 pines, rain pounding the ground so fiercely it turned the path into a small river. And in that dim grey light, listening to the endless hiss of water and thunder, I felt the first shiver of something new. Not fear exactly, but the uneasy recognition that the mountain didn't care how experienced we thought we were. When the rain eased, the forest was a dripping maze of shadows. Steam rose from the ferns, and every footstep squelched. We pushed on, but the path we'd followed had vanished under a slurry of mud and runoff. Rick swore he recognised a ridge to the east, but Claire disagreed, said the slope was too steep, the angle wrong. I checked the compass twice. The needle jittered, maybe from the iron in the rock. Jonah just stood silent, clutching the broken filter like he could will it back together. We tried to keep our pace steady, but each of us had our own version of the right way. Rick wanted to climb higher. "We'll get a view. Find the main trail." Claire argued we should drop toward the valley, follow water, find civilization. I stood between them, weighing both. The forest muffled every sound but the trickle of runoff and the occasional groan of branches heavy with rain. The silence pressed in, and for the first time, our group, usually so sure of itself, fractured into tension. By dusk, we hadn't found any sign of the main trail. We stopped in a small clearing hemmed by moss-covered boulders. The air smelled of wet pine and decay. We rigged a fire with what dry wood we could find, but the smoke was thin and sour. Dinner was cold tortillas and a few bites of jerky. Nobody talked much. I tried to sound calm when I suggested we mark the spot and stay put until morning, but inside I was unravelling. I could feel the weight of our mistakes, the bridge, the shortcut, the arrogance of thinking experience were all the same. My throat was raw from thirst. forest feels different when you're lost. The same trees that seemed welcoming in daylight turned into looming shapes. Every sound, a branch cracking, water dripping from leaves, made my heart hit. The firelight flickered across the trunks. I watched our shadows twist and waver like strangers. Sometime after midnight, I woke to the sound of footsteps, or what I thought were footsteps, moving just beyond the firelight. My first instinct was to call out, but something stopped me. It wasn't fear exactly, it was that primal awareness that you're being watched and you don't want to confirm it. I held still until the sound faded back into the dripping hush. When dawn came, we were all quiet. No one had slept well. The fire had burned to embers and our canteens were nearly empty. The air was cool and heavy with mist. I looked around at the tired faces of my friends and realised something unsettling. None of us had any real idea where we were. The ridge we'd been aiming for could have been a mile away, or 10. We broke camp in silence, the unspoken agreement hanging between us. No more guessing, no more arguing. But in the pit of my stomach, I already knew we were still heading deeper, not out. The third morning felt like stepping into another world, one where the forest had swallowed every familiar thing. The mist clung low, curling around our legs as we started uphill again. We moved slowly, cautious and quiet, saving our energy. My tongue felt thick, my head heavy from dehydration. When we reached a narrow gully, Jonah found a trickle of water seeping through the rocks. We crouched around it like pilgrims, cupping it in our hands, letting the grit settle before drinking. It tasted like earth and metal, but it eased the dryness for a while. We followed that gully, thinking it might lead us to a larger stream, but instead it funneled into a steep ravine. The mud was slick, and twice we had to haul each other up with branches. Rick started talking about climbing straight toward the ridge again, swearing that the sun's position meant the main trail had to be close. Claire snapped back, saying the light was filtered through clouds and didn't mean a damn thing. The argument flared fast, voices sharp, frustration spilling out in all directions. Enough! I finally barked, more out of desperation than authority. We stick together, pick one direction and commit. My voice echoed back through the trees, thin and tired. Nobody spoke for a long time after that. By late afternoon, the forest began to thin. The trees grew sparser, twisted by wind, and for the first time in hours, we saw sky. It should have been a relief, but the openness made me uneasy. We found a ridge, yes, but not the one we knew. The terrain dropped sharply to the north, a vast tangle of spruce and granite stretching farther than any of us expected. No familiar markers, no sign of the Skyline Trail. Just miles of wild, untouched country. We camped near the edge of that ridge. The wind was cold up there, carrying the smell of distant rain. Claire sat apart from the rest of us, staring at the horizon as the light faded. "We can't keep pretending we're almost there," she said quietly. "We need to face that we're lost." The words hung there, undeniable. Even Rick didn't argue. That night, the temperature dropped fast. We huddled close around a weak fire, counting sips of what little water we'd gathered. My mind wouldn't stop running through scenarios, how long we could last, which direction might hold a road, how rescue teams could even find us without knowing where we'd gone. Every rustle in the dark made me startle. The wilderness, which had once felt like an ally, now seemed like a living thing indifferent to our struggle. Jonah finally broke the silence. "It's crazy," he said, his voice cracking. "We're probably half a mile from the real trail and just don't know it." None of us answered, but the thought gnawed at me. He was probably right. That was the worst part. Not being lost in the middle of nowhere, but being lost almost within reach of somewhere. When I finally closed my eyes, I dreamed of switchbacks and cairns, the familiar sound of boots on the right trail. But when I woke to the grey dawn, the world around us was still strange and quiet, the forest waiting for us to make our next mistake. By the fourth day, the air itself seemed heavier, thick with fatigue, dampness, and the unspoken dread of how far we'd strayed. Our pace had slowed to a crawl. Every few hundred yards, we stopped to argue or rest or simply stare at the endless green. The forest no longer looked like a place we could navigate. It felt alive in a way that toyed with us. No matter how careful we were, every hill looked the same. Every bend promised a view that never came. The last of our food went that morning. A handful of nuts and a crumbly granola bar that we split 4 ways. Claire tried to joke about it, said it was just an accidental fast, but her voice was brittle. Rick was muttering again about the ridge, insisting that if we climbed just a bit higher, we'd see the old ranger tower he swore was on this side of the mountain. Jonah, pale and worn, refused to move until we found more water. His lips were cracked, his hands shaking slightly from thirst and exhaustion. When we reached a shallow basin, we found what looked like a dried creek bed. The stones were smooth, white as bone, and for a moment, hope flickered until I realized the soil was bone dry. It hadn't held water in weeks. The disappointment hit harder than I expected, a physical ache in my chest. We rested there a long while, heads low, the woods around us still except for the hum of insects. I caught myself glancing up at the sky, half expecting to hear the whine of a distant helicopter, but of course there was nothing. Nobody knew we were missing. We hadn't told anyone about the detour, just a quick day hike, we'd said. Experienced hikers, after all. By mid-afternoon, we stumbled upon an old hunting blind made of rotting wood. It leaned against a pine, like a forgotten memory. Inside, under a mat of leaves, I found an old tin canteen, empty but clean enough. We shared the last of the cloudy water between us, and I promised silently that if we ever got out, I'd never again take a drink for granted. That evening, something changed. The wind shifted, cool and sharp, and carried with it the faint smell of smoke. Wood smoke. Rick's head snapped up. "Campfire," he whispered. Claire shook her head, doubtful. Could be lightning strike, could be miles away. But even so, the smell was real, drifting faintly between the trees. It gave us something to chase, something human. We followed it as the light drained from the forest. Each step was cautious, desperate. The smoke grew stronger, curling through the air in thin grey ribbons. My heart beat faster, torn between hope and fear. What if it wasn't people? What if it was just another trick of the wind? When we finally saw the faint flicker of orange through the trees, I almost didn't trust my eyes. It looked like firelight, but far too small, too contained. We crept closer, moving silently now, our bodies tense with expectation. Then, through the shadows, we saw it clearly. A small campfire burning steady in a ring of stones. No one around it, no voices, no movement, just the fire, crackling softly in the quiet woods, as if waiting for us. We stood at the edge of that clearing for a long moment, the 4 of us, silent, staring at the lonely campfire. The flames danced low and steady, orange against the damp twilight. No footprints, no gear, no sound of anyone nearby. It was unsettling, like stumbling upon someone's ghost mid-meal. Rick was the first to move, stepping forward cautiously, hand on his knife. "If someone built this, they can't be far," he said. His voice was hoarse, hollow with exhaustion. We circled the fire, half expecting to find packs or a shelter, but there was nothing but a few charred logs and a rusted tin cup sitting beside a stone. Claire crouched and ran her fingers over the ashes. "It's still warm," she murmured. "They were here recently." The words sent a shiver through me. Not fear exactly, but a strange animal awareness. We weren't alone out here, or maybe we were, and that was worse. As darkness settled, the forest began to close in again, every tree trunk blending into the next. We decided to stay by the fire, better a known place than wandering blind again. Rick fed the flames with what dry twigs he could find. Claire sat close, sketching the clearing in her notebook by firelight, like she needed to document proof of something real. Jonah curled near the warmth, his eyes half closed, whispering that maybe we'd wake up to voices or headlights, but the night stayed quiet. Only the hiss of sap, the whisper of wind through pine needles. My thoughts spiraled. Who made that fire? How close were we to the real trail? What if they'd been searching for us and we'd missed them by an hour? The questions looped in my head until they didn't feel like questions anymore, just echoes of everything we didn't know. When dawn finally came, it was soft, and grey. The fire had burned to ash. The smoke smell was gone. We packed our meagre things, each movement slow and deliberate, as if afraid to disturb whatever strange balance had kept us safe through the night. Rick climbed a nearby slope to scout ahead, and after a long pause, he shouted down, "There's a marker! Trail marker!" The relief hit me like sunlight after a storm. We scrambled up to meet him, and there it was, faded paint on a post but unmistakable. The Skyline Ridge Trail. We'd crossed back onto it maybe less than a mile from where we'd lost the bridge. The realization stung almost as much as it comforted us. All that fear, all that wandering, so close to safety the entire time. When we finally reached the trailhead, no one spoke. We just stood there listening to the rustle of the forest, the sound of water somewhere below. We'd made it out, but the experience had left something behind in each of us, some awareness that confidence can turn to arrogance, and the wild doesn't bend to either. That night, back in town, I poured myself a glass of water straight from the tap. It tasted ordinary, clean, cold, simple. I stared at it for a long time before taking a sip, grateful in a way I'd never been before. Out there, we'd been lost. But maybe, in a strange way, that's how we found something worth keeping.